Not a cardboard cutout. Centoya Brown and the Framing of a Victim with Britt Schultz. The Appeal, December 2017. The evening of August 6, 2004, 16-year-old Centoya Brown shot and killed Johnny Allen, a 43-year-old Nashville resident who picked her up for sex. It was an act of self-defense, she explained to police later. After Allen took her to his house, he showed Centoya multiple guns, including shotguns and rifles. Later in bed, as she described in court, he grabbed her violently by the genitals. His demeanor became threatening, and fearing for her life, she took a gun out of her purse and shot him. Though Centoya acted to protect herself from the violence of an adult client, Nashville prosecutors argued that she shot Allen as part of a robbery. Centoya was tried as an adult and was convicted of first-degree premeditated murder, first-degree felony murder, and especially aggravated robbery, 2 years after her initial arrest on August 25, 2006. She is currently serving concurrent life sentences in Tennessee and will only be eligible for parole after serving 51 years in prison. In late November, Centoya's case roared into the headlines again when celebrities like Rihanna, Kim Kardashian, and LeBron James shared details of her conviction on social media. Rihanna posted on Instagram, "Did we somehow change the definition of #justice along the way? Something is horribly wrong when the system enables these rapists and the victim is thrown away for life. To each of you responsible for this child's sentence, I hope to God you don't have children because this could be your daughter being punished for punishing already." Kim Kardashian shared on Twitter that she had reached out to her personal attorneys to ask about how to #free Centoya Brown. It's unclear why Centoya's case has re-emerged to capture the public's imagination 13 years after her arrest. Charles Bone, one of Centoya's lawyers, told BuzzFeed that he didn't know why celebrities were now discovering Centoya's case, but he welcomed the attention. This issue in general was worthy of a lot of publicity, Bone said, especially in the culture in which we live today. As petitions calling for Centoya's release and letters demanding clemency circulate online, it's worth considering the issues raised by Centoya's conviction and the renewed push to free her from prison. Here's what's been established about her case in the court record. Centoya, who at the time of the incident was living in a room at a Nashville in-town suites, said she went home with Allen because her pimp and boyfriend Garyon McLaughlin, nicknamed Cutthroat, insisted that she needed to earn money. Cutthroat abused her physically and sexually throughout the approximately 3-week period in which she lived with him. Centoya herself was able to talk about the night of her attack and Allen's death in the PBS documentary Me Facing Life, Centoya's Story. Centoya explained that she was looking to get a ride to East Nashville to engage in street-based sex work when she met Allen, who was scouring a Sonic drive-in parking lot for sex workers. Allen propositioned her and attempted to haggle her down from $2,000 to $100. They finally agreed upon $150. Centoya characterized her survival strategies as survival sex work or teenage prostitution for an adult pimp. While she says that she was coerced into sex work by Cutthroat, Centoya never described herself as a child sex slave, a term that's now being used to characterize her experience by some advocates on social media. Such sensationalist language is reductionist and obscures the complexities inherent in the experience of young people in the sex trade and street economies. It is more helpful to turn to young women in the sex trade themselves for a better understanding of the terms they use to describe their own experiences. Shira Hassan has worked with girls involved in the sex trade and street economies as the former co-director of the now-defunct Chicago-based Women's Empowerment Project. She defines the sex trade as any way that girls are trading sex or sexuality or forced to trade sex or sexuality for anything like money, gifts, survival needs, documentation, places to stay, drugs. Survival, sex, and involvement in the sex trade are often the only means for young people to provide for themselves when they leave home. This is especially true for youth of color and queer and trans youth who have less access to resources and opportunities. The realities faced by most teenagers engaged in survival sex are shaped by the unsafe homes and housing, lack of access to employment, affordable housing, healthcare, including gender-affirming healthcare, mental health resources, and by poverty, racism, queerphobia, and misogyny. The street economy, Hassan explained, encompasses anything that you do for cash that's not taxed, whether that's hair braiding, whether that's selling CDs on the corner, something that you're going to do that's going to get you money that isn't reportable. Both of these methods are ways girls have found to survive when they're street-based. Trafficking, on the other hand, refers to any form of labor, including but not limited to sexual labor, by force, fraud, or coercion. Just seeing how long this one is. It's true that there are young people who are trafficked and who experience extraordinary violence in the sex trade, but it is important not to assume that every young person who trades sex for money is trafficked, even if the law defines anyone under the age of 18 who trades sex as trafficked, regardless of their actual experience. Doing so ignores the complexity of their experiences and does a disservice to them by denying them any agency or self-determination, including to define their own experiences and demand their own solutions. Their lives should not be flattened in the service of perfect victim narratives. Centoya is not a cardboard cutout upon whom other adults can project their narratives of youth involvement in the sex trades. She is a young woman who's experienced horrible violence, but that is not all she is. She has her own story to tell, but by portraying her as a victim without agency, some of Centoya's advocates make it more difficult for her story of self-defense, her fight to survive, and her resistance to violence to be respected. We need to find a way to describe all of her realities, both as a survivor of violence with the right to defend herself, and as a young woman who is doing her best to survive. Will this renewed focus on Centoya serve to improve the lives of all young people in the sex trade and street economies? Or will the current attention and the framing of her as a victim of sex slavery or trafficking serve to further marginalize them by silencing their voices and complexities in service of pursuing a perfect victim narrative, one that Black women are routinely excluded from? And that was a long question, so I didn't end it like a question because I forgot it started off like that. The consequences for young women who don't fit the perfect victim narrative are significant, both in terms of being harshly punished for self-defense and being framed as traffickers themselves, and then threatened with long sentences under new laws ostensibly passed for their own protection. Even if not subjected to punishment by what we call the criminal legal system, because we believe there's no justice in this system, any of the new trafficking laws passed at the state level over the past decade may force them back into foster care and other systems they have fled because of the harm they experienced. Or these laws may coerce them into treatment that does nothing to address the conditions under which they entered the sex trade in the first place. If they don't comply with what is expected of them as perfect victims, then they, like many other survivors of violence, may find themselves caged in a cell instead of receiving the support they need and deserve. And both comply and treatment and those and traffickers were all in quotations. Prosecuting and incarcerating survivors of violence puts courts and prisons in the same punitive role as their abusers, which compounds and prolongs victims' experience of ongoing trauma and abuse. The push to keep Centoya a child is also troubling. Since the recent surge of interest in her case, graphic artists have created images of Brown with the pigtails she donned during her trial, when she was 16, accompanied by the text, "Free Centoya." Another image of her at a similar age has been appropriated into a meme, juxtaposed with the rapist Brock Turner's mugshot, using her innocent age and unconfirmed case circumstances. Other names have claimed a pedophile sex trafficking ring was responsible for the violence visited upon Centoya. Why are these images and memes being circulated? Is an adult, 29-year-old Black woman an unsympathetic victim? I would say so, on the public side. If so, that part I added. If so, why? Acknowledging trauma and resilience are often ignored in the favor of the driving desire by the media and public to support only a perfect victim. Perfect victims are submissive, not aggressive. They don't have histories of drug use or prior contact with the criminal legal system, and they are innocent, in quotes, and respectable. The reality, however, is that there are no perfect victims. 29-year-old Centoya deserves to be free from prison and absolved of this crime, in quotations, no less than 16-year-old Centoya should have been. Centoya's story, while tragic and unfair, is not exceptional. As we're writing this piece, Alicia Walker, another criminalized survivor, called us from Decatur Correctional Center, an Illinois prison where she has been incarcerated since March of this year, and unless she is freed, will have to spend another 10 years. She's an amazing woman, so brave, Alicia said of Centoya's case. Shit, she was 16, No one should be punished for enduring harm themselves. That girl was just doing what she had to do. Alicia Walker was just 19 years old when in 2014 she was forced to defend herself and a friend from a violent client who demanded that they have unprotected sex with him and threatened them with rape and a knife. Alicia, like Centoya before her and so many before them, fought back. Her active self-defense was met with the violence of a racist court system that branded her a manipulative criminal mastermind. Alicia and Centoya were both young black women whose bodies were inscribed with inherent criminality and were to some degree presumed guilty until proven innocent. The judicial system acted as the judicial system as currently constituted would and could not have allowed them to be seen as innocent. Instead, Centoya and Alicia's radical acts of self-love and preservation were criminalized by those with authority. Each had the carceral weight of racism and whorephobia stacked against them. Courts basically mete out punishment disproportionate to the acts of self-defense by black women, femmes, and trans people. This criminalization of self-defense predates Centoya. We see this in the cases of survivors Lena Baker, Desi Woods, and Rosalie Ingram. For example, it has continued long after Centoya's sentencing 13 years ago. We see the same disproportionate punishment in the more recent cases of Gigi Thomas, CeCe McDonald, and Kai Peterson. And those are just the names, and stories that we know. There are many others that never grab headlines or inspire social media or grassroots defense campaigns. Let's hashtag free Centoya Brown, not only from the cage she has unjustly been held in for the past 13 years for fighting for her life, but also from the narratives that take away from her agency and police and control what it means to be a survivor of violence. And let's do the same for all the young people in the sex trade and all survivors of violence. In the words of the Young Women's Empowerment Project, social justice for girls and young women in the sex trade means having the power to make all of the decisions about our own bodies and lives without policing, punishment, or violence. We are not the problem, we are the solution. And there's an asterisk, and the asterisk note is Young Women's Empowerment Project. Girls do what they have to do to survive, illuminating methods used by girls in the sex trade and street economy to fight back and heal. And that's it for now.